The day the divorce papers were signed, my husband froze every one of my assets. He must have wanted to see me out on the street, but what he didn't know was that for 8 years, I had been meticulously preparing for his empty-handed exit. Do you think this is one of those cliché stories where, after the divorce, I end up on the sidewalk, weeping and begging, tasting endless humiliation? You're wrong. This is a story about a trap I've spent 8 years weaving, thread by patient thread. Today is the day I tighten that trap with my own hands. The day I close the lid on the coffin of a man who mistook himself for a king. The day we signed the papers, he was in such a hurry that the moment we left the lawyer's office, he called his bank's wealth manager and instructed them to freeze every account associated with my name. He wanted to see me on my knees. He wanted to hear me beg. He wanted to relish the sight of me trembling without a single dollar to my name. He smirked the smirk of a man accustomed to treating his wife as a shadow. He scoffed, thinking I was foolish, that I had nothing besides him. But he didn't know. From the first year I set foot in that house, I had been practicing how to live like someone who would one day leave. I learned to smile when I was dismissed, to remain silent when I was humiliated, to nod when I was controlled, and most importantly, I learned how to hide myself beneath the mask of a perfect hostess, only to strike back without a single misstep when I had grown strong enough to pierce his heart. My name is Evelyn Reed. Today is the day Julian Croft and I finalize our divorce at the county clerk's office. Before leaving the penthouse overlooking the East River, I paused, taking one last look at the place. For 7 years there, I walked on the cold marble floors as if on thin ice. The home was breathtakingly beautiful, but everything gleamed without a trace of warmth. There was no sense of loss. Instead, I felt a sense of liberation, a lightness as if a necklace that had been choking me for years had finally been unclasped. Julian Croft was sitting in the back of a black luxury sedan. The window was only halfway down, as if to maintain a distance. He was wearing a gray suit, a luxury watch glinting on his wrist. His handsome appearance, which I once took pride in, now looked like nothing more than a hollow shell. "What are you standing there for?" he snapped dismissively. "Get in. I have a 10:30 meeting." I didn't answer, simply opening the car door and getting in. The air inside was so cold you could imagine the windows frosting over with a single sharp breath. The driver, Mr. Peterson, glanced at me in the rearview mirror. His sympathetic look was all too familiar. People pitied me because they thought I was the loser. A 2-year-old woman, a homemaker for 7 years, with no career, no money, no connections, nothing. The kind of woman who gets thrown away when her husband grows tired of her, destined for the streets if kicked out. It's the story society often tells to frighten women into submission. The car pulled up in front of the county clerk's office. Julian walked hastily, like a man who feared losing control if he were a minute late. I followed him, my steps unusually calm and steady. The entire process was swift. The documents stamped. 2 thin red-covered booklets, as heavy as a lifetime of humiliation. Before I could even fully grasp the documents, Julian's lips curled into the first and only smile he had shown all day. "Evelyn," he said slowly, as if bestowing a great favor. "Out of respect for our time as a couple, I won't let you end up completely destitute on the street." He placed his copy into his briefcase, then looked straight at my face, determined to savor my every reaction. "Your supplementary credit cards were canceled as of yesterday. All the payment apps on your phone have been disconnected." "Oh, right. You don't have a salary," he sneered. "That allowance card I gave you, that's been frozen too." I lifted my head, widened my eyes just enough, and feigned a choked expression, as if I were about to collapse. "Julian, what is this?" Julian was satisfied. He leaned in, lowering his voice, but every word struck my ear with perfect clarity. "From this moment on, you don't have a single cent to your name. The locks on the penthouse have been changed. I had the housekeeper pack up all your things and leave them with the doorman." "Oh, and your parents' house, out in upstate New York? I heard it was leveraged against your brother's business loan 6 months ago. The bank's been putting on a lot of pressure, I hear." He scrutinized me as if watching a play. "How are you going to live now? Sleep under a bridge? Or go crying to your family, begging while reminiscing about the old days? His voice was filled with a cruel pleasure. Get on your knees and beg. Who knows? I might feel generous and give you a few bucks for a cheap rental. A clerk nearby looked up. Their gaze was a strange mix of curiosity, discomfort, and pity. I felt my hand, clutching the red-covered booklet, begin to tremble. My nails dug into my palm, leaving white marks. Julian thought I was trembling with fear. He was wrong. I was biting my lip to keep from bursting out laughing. 8 years, Julian, and you haven't changed a bit. That habit of grinding someone under your heel and then asking if it hurts, all for your own amusement. I took a breath and lowered my eyes, allowing tears to well up at the perfect moment. I acted with the emotions I had genuinely felt for the past few years. It was incredibly easy. Did you really have to go this far? I said in a choked voice. He scoffed. Go this far? This is me teaching you to face reality. The reality, Evelyn, that without me, you are nothing. He waved his hand as if shooing away a fly. Get lost. Don't be an eyesore. He turned his back. His straight, swift posture was like that of someone who had just thrown out a bag of trash and felt unburdened. I stood still, watching the car drive away. As its taillights disappeared around the corner, the victim's expression I had worn vanished from my face as cleanly as taking off a mask. I raised my hand and wiped away a single tear from the corner of my eye. It was a tear I had squeezed out, not a tear of pain. I opened the handbag I had carried for 5 years and, from deep within the lining, took out an old, beat-up phone. It was an ancient flip phone, so scratched and worn that no one would give it a second glance. I pressed a speed dial key, and the other person answered before the first ring finished. It was a young, concise woman's voice. Evelyn. Status? I asked in a calm voice. Just as we expected. He's blocked everything. I glanced down at the red-covered booklet in my hand, then curled my lips into a smile in the direction Julian had disappeared. Excellent. I paused for a moment. Then, as if naming a storm, I said, let's begin. Activate Project Hurricane and inform everyone involved. Everything must move in perfect sync. I hung up and put the old phone back deep into my bag. Behind me, people still believed I was a pitiful woman kicked out of her home, but I had just pressed the start button on a grinder, and standing right in the middle of that grinder was Julian Croft. Leaving the clerk's office, I didn't hail a cab. I walked on purpose. The sun, not yet at its zenith, beat down on the hot New York City pavement. I pulled the brim of my hat down low. Feeling the sweat trickle down my back, I let people see a woman who had just gotten divorced, penniless, and lost in a massive city. The gazes that passed me were a mixture of pity, curiosity, and indifference. I needed all of it. I had to make this entire city believe I had hit rock bottom. I went to a bus stop at a street corner and sat on a metal bench. When I opened my hand, there were only a few crumpled bills and some coins. A 20, a 10, and some change. The perfect props for my destitute act. I deliberately recounted the money so the person next to me could see. A woman selling lottery tickets from a newsstand saw me and sighed. Rough breakup, honey? She asked in a gravelly voice. I nodded, letting my eyes redden appropriately. It'll pass. You just gotta hang in there. I smiled and said, thank you. I had heard such words of comfort for 7 years straight, every time Julian humiliated me in front of his relatives. They were so familiar that I knew exactly how much to lower my head to avoid further questions. A bus arrived. I paid with cash, got on, and sat in the very back. The smells of people, oil, and the city mingled together. In my mind, the milestones of my timeline lit up like traffic lights. From the moment Julian froze my accounts, the clock had started ticking. In 3 hours, his company's finance department would receive their liquidity report. In 6 hours, a major client from the Midwest would call about a disruption in their cash flow. In 24 hours, rumors would begin to spread among his investors. I didn't need to rush. I just needed to not be late. The bus stopped at its final destination. I got off, pulling an old suitcase I had prepared a week ago. Inside were just a few modest outfits, a pair of flat shoes, and a few thin notebooks. I turned into a small alley. Flickering signs, run-down diners, auto repair shops, and tightly packed SRO hotels. This was what people called a village within the city. Cramped and noisy, but it guaranteed anonymity. Anonymity was what I needed. The room I would be staying in was on the second floor. The stairs were narrow, the railing rusted. The manager opened the door and looked me up and down. Alone? Yes. Deposit is 1 month's rent. The room is small, and the bathroom is shared. I nodded and handed him the money. The manager looked at the few bills, sighed, and said, "All right. Let me know if you need anything." When the door closed, the empty room contained only a metal bed, an old fan, and a single yellow light bulb. I put down my suitcase and sat on the edge of the bed. The sound of cars echoed from the alley outside. I sat still for 5, then 10 minutes, giving anyone who might be watching me enough time to report that I had checked into a shabby SRO. From the bottom of my suitcase, I took out another phone. It was slim, fully charged, and had a strong signal. I called Chloe, one of only 2 people who knew the entire structure of the plan. Report. He blocked everything, just like you predicted, Ev. But don't worry, the 3 backup accounts under the Shell Corporation are fully operational. The funds are secure. Good. What about the Midwest client? They just sent an email inquiring about this week's payment. Don't reply. Let them get anxious. I hung up. Haste makes waste. For dinner, I bought a $5 sandwich from a deli at the entrance of the alley. I paid with exact change. The owner looked at me with pity and threw in an extra bag of chips. I returned to my room and ate slowly. I opened the window, letting the light from the street lamp stream in. I needed these small details to cultivate the story of poverty. A picture of the sandwich, the yellow light, the peeling wallpaper, all of it would be used at the right place and time. 9 p.m. The old phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. "Heard you're out on the street." I knew who it was. Brenda, the wife of one of Julian's close business partners. A woman who always loved to spread gossip. I replied with a short text. "Yeah, just found an SRO." The ellipsis appeared for a long time. Julian can be so cruel. I didn't reply. My silence would be interpreted in the way most favorable to me. 11 p.m. I turned off the light and lay down on the metal bed. The fan squeaked. I closed my eyes. In my mind, I opened the invisible ledger from 8 years ago. The first year of our marriage, Julian gave me a supplementary card, saying as if bestowing a great favor, "Buy whatever you need for the house. Just tell me if you need anything." I said thank you in a very small voice. From that day on, I saved a few dollars from every grocery run, a few dozen every month, a few hundred every year. I kept records, and at night, I studied how to read financial statements. While he slept, I opened an account in my friend Chloe's name and learned to make slow but steady investments. I wasn't aiming for a jackpot. I needed to survive. A small noise from the hallway brought me back to the present. Someone passed by. I opened my eyes and stared at the ceiling. I wasn't afraid. The biggest fear of my life had been left behind in that penthouse on the river, along with the sound of Julian's laughter. The next morning, I woke up early. I put on an old shirt and black pants, tying my hair in a low ponytail. I went to the coffee shop at the entrance of the alley and ordered the cheapest iced Americano. I sat in a corner and took out a thin notebook, writing something down. To an outsider, I would look like an unemployed woman doodling aimlessly. No one knew I was drawing the cash flow chart of a corporation that was about to suffocate. The phone rang. It was Chloe. The Midwest client just called a second time. Their tone is getting sharper. Good. Let it be. What about the bank? They'll be sending the delinquency notice as scheduled. Understood. I took a sip of the bitter coffee. Julian hated bitter things. He liked things that were sweet, easy to swallow. That was his weakness. Ring, ring. A call from an unknown number. I answered. Evelyn Reed? Yes. Is this a good time? We have an administrative position open at our company. The pay isn't great, but it's stable. I remained silent for 2 seconds. Then, in a voice mixed with gratitude and worry, I replied, "Thank you. Could I have a little time to think about it?" "Of course. Take your time." I hung up. I knew this was the first fishing line, a small, fragrant bait cast to see if I was truly starving. I would bite, but not now. In the afternoon, I returned to my room, changed clothes, and walked to the bus terminal. I stood there for a long time, watching people come and go. I needed more witnesses to the story, that I had nowhere to go. I shed a few tears at the appropriate moment. In the evening, a text came from Julian. A single line. "Have you had time to think?" I looked at the screen and smiled faintly. I replied, "Give me a little more time." 3 minutes later, he replied, "Don't test my patience." I put the phone down. His patience was the most fragile thing in the world. I knew that. That night, I turned on the slim phone and sent a short email. There was no subject line, just a single attachment, a risk analysis report for a real estate project near an industrial park, an analysis I had prepared a very long time ago. The recipient was an address I had memorized for 2 years but never used. After sending it, I turned off the phone. The first gust of wind had blown, and tomorrow morning, the sky over Julian Croft would begin to change color. On the morning of the 3rd day after the divorce, I woke before dawn. The small SRO room was filled with a musty smell mixed with the lingering scent of last night's rain. I got up, opened the window, and took a deep breath. The early morning air of the poor alley had something raw and very real about it. It reminded me how far a person could fall if they didn't stay sharp. I washed my face with cold water and looked at my reflection in the small mirror on the wall. The mirror was blurry, but the gaze within it was clear, calm. There was no joy, no resentment, only the focus of a person walking a tightrope. I had to maintain this pace. Every step now had to be precise. I put on an old shirt, slung a canvas bag over my shoulder, and headed to the alley entrance. The sandwich shop was just opening, so I bought the cheapest one and paid in cash. The owner gave me an extra packet of hot sauce and said, "This'll make it go down easier, kid." I nodded. What I needed wasn't comfort, but words like these that would let my story spread naturally. In alleys like this, rumors traveled faster than newspapers. I went to the same coffee shop as yesterday and sat in the same seat. I opened my notebook and wrote a few lines, then erased them. In truth, I was waiting for a single phone call, and it came at the exact right time. It was Chloe. The bank sent the delinquency notice. Evelyn. Okay, send him a copy, but send it late, just before the end of business hours. The Midwest client just texted again. They said if it's delayed 2 more days, they'll have to renegotiate the contract. Good. Don't reply. I hung up and took a sip of coffee. I imagined Julian sitting in a glass-walled conference room, tapping his fingers on the table, his voice louder than usual. He hated situations he couldn't control, and I was slowly chipping away at that very control. Around 10 a.m., the same number from yesterday called again. "Miss Reed, about that administrative position. If you're interested, you can come in this afternoon to discuss it." I paused for 2 seconds, then replied, "Yes, that would be fine. Thank you." I knew this wasn't a job. It was a mirror. They wanted to see if I still had my pride. I would show them that I was desperate, but not debased. In the afternoon, I went to an office building in a commercial district downtown. The lobby was small, the elevator old. The interviewer was a middle-aged man with a monotonous voice. He looked at my empty resume and nodded. "It's been quite a while since you've worked." "Yes, I was taking care of my family at home." "And you're divorced now?" I lowered my head. "Yes." He looked at me more closely, as if weighing me. "The salary isn't high, and the work is repetitive. Will you be okay with that?" I nodded, just fast enough to show eagerness, but slow enough not to seem too desperate. "I need stability." He smiled, the smile of a man who thinks he holds the weights on the scale. "All right, we'll be in touch." Leaving the building, I paused for a few minutes. I knew someone would report to Julian that I was looking for a low-paying job and was ready to accept anything. I needed him to believe that. On the way back, I stopped at a burner phone store and bought a prepaid SIM card. The clerk asked no questions, just took my cash and handed it over. I needed another anonymous means of contact. Back in the SRO, I locked the door, sat on the bed, and turned on the slim phone. There was a reply from the address I had emailed last night. No subject, just a single line. "Tomorrow morning, 9 a.m. Let's meet at the park by the river." I stared at the sentence. My heartbeat remained steady. He had taken the bait, but big fish always put up a fight. I had to be prepared. In the evening, Julian called. I let it ring 3 times before answering. What the hell have you been up to? His voice was starting to fray. I paused for a moment. What do you mean? A delinquency notice came from the bank. The client keeps calling. What have you been saying out there? I smiled faintly, making my voice tremble. I haven't said anything. I don't know anything about your business, Julian, he snorted. Don't play dumb. I know you're not as simple as you look. I swallowed. You're overestimating me. Silence. I could hear his breathing over the phone. Evelyn, he said slowly, I'll give you a chance to talk again. I can offer you some support. Support. The word he had used with me for 7 years. I closed my eyes. Images of nights spent balancing ledgers in the kitchen flashed through my mind. I need time to think. I'm not a patient man. I know. I hung up first. It was a small thing, but enough to unsettle him. That night, I repacked my suitcase, selecting the most modest, clean, but unremarkable clothes. I needed to look like a woman fresh out of a marriage. No jewelry, no glamour. I put the old phone in an outer pocket and the slim phone in an inner one. The next morning, I arrived at the park by the river 15 minutes early. The sky was clear, the breeze gentle. A man was sitting on a bench with his back to me. Straight posture, white shirt, dark pants. As I approached, he turned. His eyes were sharp, but there was no suspicion in them. Ms. Reed. Yes, I'm Marcus Thorne. I sat on the opposite bench. There were no handshakes, no pleasantries. Your analysis report was very interesting, he said. Where did you get the data? From my life experience. He raised an eyebrow. Do you know who you're messing with? I do. And what do you want? I looked him straight in the eye. For the truth to come out, and for a legitimate platform to stand on. He smiled very faintly. And you think I'll trust you? You don't have to trust me right away. You just need to verify. I took a thin stack of documents from my canvas bag and placed it on the bench. These are the discrepancies from the latest quarterly financial statement. This is the legal risk assessment for the property. And this, I paused, is the money trail he thought no one would ever see. Marcus Thorne flipped through the pages wordlessly. The wind rustled the edges of the paper. Time passed very slowly. Finally, he looked up. You're calmer than I expected. Because I've waited a long time. He nodded. All right, I'll have my people look into this. But you should know, once we start, there's no going back. I smiled. From the day he froze my accounts, there was no way back for me. We stood up. He handed me a business card. Wait for my call. I took the card without looking at it. I knew the game had moved to a new board. On my way back, the old phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. Heard you met with a stranger. I didn't reply. I looked up at the sky. Clouds were gathering. The wind had changed direction, and though Julian Croft didn't know it yet, he was standing in the eye of a hurricane. As I left the park, the sunlight felt even more intense. The light reflecting off the river shimmered like a thin blade. Marcus Thorne's business card felt firm and solid in my jacket pocket, a token confirming the game had expanded. I didn't rush to call Chloe. In some moments, silence is the best way to maintain balance. I walked along the riverside path, blending in with the people out for their morning exercise. An old woman walking her dog, children on bikes, middle-aged men jogging slowly. No one looked at me. I liked that feeling, being invisible in a crowd, able to think without being watched. Back in the SRO, I locked the door and drew the curtains. I placed the 2 phones on the desk and organized my papers. Each stack had its purpose. I didn't allow emotion to interfere. Emotion was a rare luxury, permitted only late at night when I was alone. During the day, I was an operator. At exactly 11 a.m., Chloe called. Marcus Thorne's side has started their verification process. They've requested 2 additional sets of documents. Send them what we prepared. No more, no less. One more thing, Chloe lowered her voice. Julian Croft just finished an internal meeting. They said he slammed his hand on the table in anger. I smiled. A predictable reaction. He always uses the sound of a slamming table to hide his fear. I hung up and turned on my old laptop. The screen was a bit blurry, but it was good enough for writing. I logged into an anonymous email account and checked for replies. Nothing new. I knew people like Marcus wouldn't respond hastily. They needed time to confirm I wasn't just a reckless, one-time player. For lunch, I went down to the deli at the alley entrance. The owner asked, "What'll it be today?" "The same as yesterday." The owner nodded and made my sandwich. A man at the next table was talking loudly on the phone about loans and maturity dates. I overheard snippets, but didn't try to listen. At times like these, such talk only reminded me of Julian's strained breathing. After eating, I went back to my room and lay down for a while. I needed to conserve my energy. A storm was going to hit in the afternoon. Around 3 p.m., the old phone buzzed. A text from Julian. "What are you doing?" I read it and didn't reply. 5 minutes later, he called. I answered. "I'm out," I said in a tired voice. "Where?" "Looking for a job." "A job?" he scoffed. "Where?" "Anywhere that'll pay." He was silent for a few seconds. I could hear his breathing clearly. "You think you can survive on that kind of pocket change?" "I don't have a choice," I said, my voice small, almost a whimper. "Please don't make things harder for me." He sighed, his voice softening. "Come back and let's talk. I can give you something. Not a lot, but enough to live on." "How much?" I asked, not because I needed it, but to test him. 25,000. I closed my eyes. $25,000. An amount he once spent on a single bar tab. "I'll think about it. I won't wait long." "I know." I hung up. My hand wasn't shaking. I knew he was losing his patience, and when people lose patience, they make mistakes. Immediately, a text came from Chloe. He just instructed his legal team to review all joint assets. "Let them. There's nothing for them to find. He's suspecting you." "Let him." I got up and opened the window. The sky was getting cloudy. The clouds were thick. I liked afternoons like this. They weigh on people's minds, making them more likely to slip. In the evening, an email came from Marcus, a single line. "Tomorrow, 8:30 a.m. at my office." I replied briefly. "Understood." I knew this was the second verification step. If I passed, I would officially enter another space, one where law, money, and power conversed in a cold language. That night, I prepared meticulously. I didn't take too many documents, only the most essential ones. I had to prove that I knew where to stop. The next morning, I wore a simple white shirt, black pants, and flat shoes. I arrived at Marcus's office on time. The building was tall, the lobby spacious, the lighting white. I passed the reception desk and gave my name. A staff member guided me to a small conference room. Marcus arrived 5 minutes after me. He placed a stack of documents on the table. "Our preliminary investigation shows the problem is not small." He looked at me. There was no more suspicion in his eyes. "What do you want from us?" "I want the truth to be laid on the table, according to procedure." "You know this will provoke his retaliation, don't you?" "I'm prepared," Marcus nodded. "All right. We will continue our in-depth investigation. During this period, you are not to have any direct contact with the target." "Understood. One more thing," he added. "You need a better cover, a legitimate position." "I see. Can you arrange that?" "It's possible, but you'll have to prove your capabilities." I smiled. "I've been doing that for 8 years. He stood up and extended his hand. This time, we shook. A brief, firm handshake. As I left the building, a text came from Julian. "I'm coming to where you are tonight." I stared at the text. His loss of control was palpable in every letter. I replied, "That's not a good idea." "So you're avoiding me." "I'm just tired." The ellipsis appeared for a long time. "I will find you." I turned off the screen. I knew he would find me, and I knew that every step he took now was leaving a trace. I returned to the SRO and packed a small bag, not to run away, but to prepare. I looked around the small room. Suddenly, it no longer felt like a temporary shelter. It was a transfer station, a place where I had stood firm when everything else had collapsed. Outside, it started to rain. Heavy drops poured down hard. I sat on the bed, opened my notebook, and wrote a single line. Phase 2. The enemy reveals himself. I underlined it. This rain wouldn't just wet the streets. That night, the rain fell for a long time. I sat with my back against the wall, listening to the sound of raindrops on the tin roof. It was like a steady beat for the thoughts in my head. Julian had said he would find me. I believed him. That man was not used to being refused, especially not by me. Around 11 p.m., the old phone rang. I didn't need to see the screen to know who it was. I waited until the sixth ring to answer. "Where are you?" His voice was low but tense, like a guitar string pulled too tight. "I'm resting," I said. "Where are you?" "At the SRO address." I fell silent, long enough for him to think I was afraid. "Evelyn," he growled, "don't play games with me. What do you want?" "We need to talk. We're divorced." "Being divorced doesn't give you the right to interfere with my business." I smiled faintly, just enough for it to be almost inaudible over the phone. "I don't have that kind of power." He was silent. I could hear his breathing mixed with the sound of the rain. "I'm nearby," he said. "Open the door." I stood up and went to the window, looking down into the alley. A black car was parked at the entrance, its lights off. I knew he wouldn't come in. This neighborhood was nothing like the places he was used to. "I'm not comfortable with that. I'm not asking for your opinion. Go home," I said slowly and clearly. "Coming in here will only make things worse." "Are you threatening me?" "No, I'm advising you." I hung up. My hand felt slightly warm, but it wasn't shaking. I knew that from this moment on, he would start doing foolish things. The next morning, Chloe called very early. "He's got people searching everywhere. Someone said they saw his car at the alley entrance last night. Let people see him losing his mind." Got it. I had a cold sandwich for breakfast. I chewed slowly, watching the alley begin to fill with people. Life here went on, regardless of the storm brewing far away. Around 9 a.m., a call came from the bank. "Miss Reed, we need to re-verify some information regarding your family's collateral assets." "Yes," I replied in a moderately concerned voice. "Is there a problem?" "There's been a request for additional documents from the co-guarantor." I knew who the co-guarantor was. "Julian." "I'll prepare them," I said and hung up. I texted Chloe. "He's starting to use my family. Should we intervene?" "No." Wait, one more step. At lunchtime, an email arrived from the HR department of the company I'd interviewed with. "Miss Reed, your employment has been confirmed. You can start next week." I stared at the sentence, thought for a few seconds, and replied, "Thank you. I'll be there." This position wasn't for the money. It would be the perfect piece in the picture of a fallen woman desperately clinging to anything. In the afternoon, I went to Marcus Thorne's office for a brief appointment. This time, it was a small office, not a conference room. He handed me a stack of documents, the results of the second appraisal. I skimmed the numbers and read notes. Everything was as I expected. "He doesn't know yet?" I asked. "Not yet, but he will soon." "Good." Marcus looked at me and said in a low voice, "You need to be mentally prepared. When the information leaks, he will use every means to fight back, including against your family." "I am prepared." He nodded. "We will maintain our distance until the right moment. You continue to live your life." "I'm very good at that." Leaving the office, a text came from Julian. "Do you think you've won?" I didn't reply. I knew that silence now would make him more anxious than any words. In the evening, I returned to the SRO, changed clothes, and lay on the bed. The phone kept buzzing. I turned off the ringer. I needed to sleep. Tomorrow would be a long day. The next day, I went to my new job. The office was small, the work simple. I worked very hard, very obediently. I wanted everyone to remember me as a kind, diligent woman. In the middle of the day, a text came from an unknown number. "How long do you think you can hide?" I knew it was Julian. He was using another SIM card. I replied, "You're scaring me." An ellipsis appeared. "You should be scared." I put the phone down and took a deep breath. I could feel the net closing in, but I wasn't standing in the middle of the net. I was outside, pulling the strings. In the afternoon, Chloe called. He just transferred a large sum of money abnormally. To where? To an intermediary company, very hastily. I closed my eyes. He was digging his own grave. Should we stop it? No. Let it be. In the evening, my mother called. Her voice was worried. "Evelyn, someone from the bank came by asking questions. Is something wrong?" "Mom, don't worry. I'm handling it. Are you okay?" I bit my lip. "I'm fine." After hanging up, I sat for a long time. This was the only moment of the day I allowed myself to feel tired. But fatigue didn't mean retreat. At night, I wrote another line in my notebook. The enemy is beginning to lose financial control. I underlined it. Outside, a car roared up and then stopped. I looked out the window. A familiar black car sped past the alley entrance. It didn't stop. Julian was running, and I was waiting. I woke up before the alarm went off. The SRO room was quiet, with only the regular whir of the fan. I got up and planted my feet on the cold tile floor. I could feel my heartbeat distinctly. Not fast, not slow, the precise rhythm of someone accustomed to waiting. I made a cup of instant coffee and leaned against the windowsill, sipping it slowly. Down in the alley, people were opening their shops, metal doors creaking open. A new day had begun. And for Julian, it was another day to endure. I arrived at the office earlier than usual. I needed to build a stable, regular image, the divorced new hire, working hard without complaint. I turned on my computer and organized my documents. The work wasn't difficult, but I handled it with extreme care. This diligence would be my armor. Around 9 a.m., the phone rang. It was Chloe. He just signed a short-term loan agreement. The interest rate is very high. How much? Almost $15 million. I closed my eyes for a second. In his situation, that amount was poison. Leave it be. What assets did he use as collateral? Shares in a subsidiary. Good. I hung up and opened an Excel sheet, adding another line to my timeline. When someone starts using equity to cover a cash shortage, they've accepted the risk of losing control. Julian was on a slippery slope. During work, a call came from Marcus Thorne. Do you have a few minutes? Yes. Our side has confirmed 2 additional irregularities. We will be sending an official request for an in-depth investigation. When? Around the end of the week. The rumors will arrive before the documents do. I smiled. That was more than enough. Marcus hesitated. Are you all right? I'm fine. And your family? I've already spoken with them. He let out a light sigh. Good. We'll support you from behind the scenes. After the call, I returned to my computer screen. My hands weren't shaking. Everything was proceeding according to plan. At lunch, I ate with my office colleagues. They talked about their kids, the cost of living, rent. I listened, nodding occasionally. I didn't talk about myself. There was no need. The less people knew, the safer I was. In the afternoon, Julian called. I looked at the screen, hesitated for a second, then answered. Where are you? At the office. Office? Yes, I'm working. He gave a dry laugh. Doing what? In that tiny office? A job is a job. We need to meet. I'm not comfortable with that. So, you're avoiding me. I'm not avoiding you. Then meet me. Calm down. My voice was soft, not challenging. Calm down? He growled. You're ruining me. I remained silent. Evelyn, he lowered his voice. How much do you want? I closed my eyes. This was the question I had been waiting for. I don't make deals. I'll give you 50,000. No, 100. I smiled faintly. You think everything has a price? Don't be sanctimonious. I'm not. I'm just tired. I hung up before he could respond. Immediately, a flood of texts came in. I didn't read them. I turned off the screen. After work, I didn't go straight back to the SRO. I visited my parents' home in upstate New York. I had to see them, to make sure they were safe. My father was sitting on the porch. He looked thinner than before. My mother was trimming vegetables and stood up when she saw me. Her eyes were red. You're here? Yes. We sat down. I told them only what was necessary, leaving out the details to avoid alarming them. Take care of yourself, my father said. You don't know what that man might do. I know. My mother took my hand. If anything happens, come here. I nodded. I didn't say that it was for their sake that I couldn't back down. In the evening, I returned to the SRO. A text from Chloe came. Rumors are circulating in the industry that his company is under an informal audit. He knows. Good. I opened my notebook and wrote another line. The enemy is beginning to enter a state of panic. I underlined it twice. That night, I didn't fall asleep right away. I sat on the bed, listening to the sound of cars in the alley. Near midnight, there was a knock on the door. I got up without turning on the light. Who is it? Evelyn, open the door. It was Julian's voice, very close. I stood still. Go home. Open the door. You're scaring me. I'm not leaving. I took out my phone and dialed a pre-saved number. I didn't need to call. Just having the screen lit up was enough. If you don't leave, I'm calling the police. Silence. 1 beat, 2 beats. You wouldn't dare. I dare, I said slowly and clearly. I heard a rough breath from outside the door, then the sound of footsteps retreating. I heard a car start and drive away. I sank onto the bed. My hands were a bit cold, but my mind was crystal clear. I knew he had just crossed a line, and every time he did, the evidence grew thicker. The next morning, vague articles about cash flow problems at a real estate firm started appearing in online newspapers. No names were mentioned, but people in the industry would know. My phone kept ringing, but I didn't answer. I knew that from now on, Julian would no longer be in control. He would be reacting, and reactions in a state of panic always reveal weaknesses. I closed my notebook and got ready for work. Before leaving the room, I looked around the SRO one more time. I had stood firm here when I was pushed to the brink. Now, it was my turn to move forward. That morning, I left the SRO with the clear sense that I had no more room to retreat. Not out of fear, but because everything had passed the point of no return. The alley was the same noisy, dusty, and people were still laughing, talking, and haggling, living their very ordinary lives. I blended in with them, putting on the most ordinary appearance. Inside, however, all the gears began to turn faster. I arrived at the office on time. I had been at my computer for less than 10 minutes when the office started buzzing. A colleague whispered in my ear, "Did you hear the news?" "What news?" "There's a rumor that a big real estate company is under investigation. The higher-ups are in chaos." I looked up, feigning surprise. "Really?" "Yes. A friend who works at a bank said there's a problem with their cash flow." I said no more, just nodded. The fact that the rumor had spread to the lowest ranks meant that panic had begun on the upper floors. Around 10 a.m., the old phone rang. It was Chloe. He's convened an emergency meeting with his lawyers. What did they ask? About you. I smiled. How so? They asked who you've been in contact with, who's backing you. No one could answer. I hung up. I knew Julian was combing through every corner of his memory, trying to find someone I could lean on. But for the past 8 years, I had been very good at making myself seem harmless. I ate lunch alone. I needed space to think. Marcus had said the rumors would travel faster than the documents. And when the documents arrived, it wouldn't be a single blow, but a series of attacks. I had to make sure I didn't step into the center too early. At 2 p.m. sharp, I received an internal email at my new job. It was an announcement for a short training session on financial processes. I signed up immediately. I had to appear in various legitimate places, leaving a clear trail of work. During the training, my phone kept vibrating. An unknown number. I didn't answer. Then a text came. "You must think you're very clever." I didn't reply. Another text came right after. "Don't provoke me." I placed the phone face down on the desk. I knew he was trying to drag me into an emotional conversation. I wouldn't step into it. At quitting time, as soon as I walked out the main entrance, I saw a familiar black car parked across the street. My heart skipped a beat, but my face remained calm. I didn't look in that direction and walked straight ahead. The car door flew open. "Evelyn!" His voice called my name in the middle of the street, oblivious to the surrounding eyes. I stopped and turned around. "What are you doing here?" "Get in the car." "No." He approached and blocked my path. His face was gaunter, his eyes bloodshot, his collar askew. "Just come with me. I don't want to make a scene." "You're the one making a scene right now," I said, just loud enough for him to hear. "Go home. Do you think your little tricks can fool me? I don't know what you're talking about." He sneered, but his smile was distorted. "Who did you meet? What did you send?" I looked him straight in the eye. "You're afraid, aren't you?" A second of silence. I saw him flinch. "I'm not afraid," he growled. "You are," I repeated in a calm voice. "That's why you're standing here." He reached out and grabbed my wrist. The grip wasn't strong, but it was enough to feel his loss of control. "Let go," I said. "Come with me." I said, "Let go," I repeated, louder. People around us started to stare. A security guard approached. "Is there a problem here?" Julian hesitated. I used that moment to pull my hand away. "It's nothing," I told the guard. "Just an acquaintance who had a misunderstanding." The guard looked at us and nodded, but his eyes remained wary. Julian took a step back. "You think I'll just let this go? I don't care if you let it go or not. You're going to regret this." I looked at him slowly. "You've said that before." I turned my back and walked away. This time, he didn't follow. Back in the SRO, I locked the door and leaned against it for a few seconds. Not out of fear, but because I needed to confirm one thing. He had left a trail in front of witnesses. I turned on my phone and sent a short text to Marcus. Target approached and applied pressure in a public space. Less than 10 minutes later, he replied, "Noted." In the evening, Chloe called. "He's trying to secure additional loans, but many places are turning him down. Because of the rumors, his financials are starting to look bad." "Good. Aren't you worried he'll do something drastic?" I was silent for a moment. "I am. That's why we have to be faster." That night, I lay in bed, staring at the ceiling. The image of Julian standing in the middle of the street, his unfocused gaze, came to mind. The man who once believed he could control everything was now being consumed by his own panic. I opened my notebook and continued writing. The enemy has started making direct contact and public mistakes. I underlined it 3 times. Outside, the wind blew hard, and the window rattled lightly. I pulled the blanket up and closed my eyes. Tomorrow, the documents would arrive, and when they did, nothing would be a rumor anymore. The next morning, I woke up very early. Not because I had slept poorly, but because my body had grown accustomed to being one step ahead. Faint sunlight streamed through the SRO window, illuminating the small desk covered in notes. I made coffee and drank it slowly, rereading everything I had written over the past few months. Every timeline was matching up perfectly. That made me unusually calm. I arrived at the office earlier than usual. The atmosphere today was different. People were gathered in small groups, talking quietly, or had their faces buried in their computers, but their eyes kept glancing outside. Around 9 a.m., all employees were instructed to remain at their desks. An internal email was sent out asking for cooperation with the audit team's work for the day. The atmosphere froze. I could clearly hear sharp breaths, the sound of chairs scraping. A few people stood up in panic, then sat back down. I didn't. I had been waiting for this moment for a long time. About 15 minutes later, a group of people entered. Dark suits, name badges clearly visible on their chests. No one said much, but their mere presence made the entire floor hold its breath. They went straight to the executive office area, and the glass door closed. I kept my head down and worked as usual. Near noon, a text came from Chloe. "It's started," I replied briefly. "Proceed as planned." She sent a thumbs-up emoji. I understood. That lunch, no one was in the mood to eat. I still ate my humble sandwich. I chewed slowly. I felt not triumph, but a very familiar sense of emptiness. When a goal is within reach, one is no longer excited. Only a cold composure remains. As the afternoon began, my phone rang. It was Julian's number. I stared at it for a few seconds, then answered. "What did you do?" His voice was hoarse, the familiar arrogance gone. "I'm working." "You think you've won?" "I'm not playing a game of winning or losing." He growled a laugh. "Don't be fake. You're the one who drove me to this." "You walked there yourself," I said. "You think these little things can kill me?" "I think the law will be enough." A long silence followed. I could hear his ragged breathing clearly over the phone. "What do you want?" I closed my eyes for a second. "I want you to stop. And don't touch my family. You think I have anything left to lose?" "You do," I said softly. "Your last shred of pride." He laughed, but the sound was broken. "You were always so moral." "No," I replied. "I'm just different from you." I hung up before he could say more. In the afternoon, information began to leak. A few financial news outlets published short articles using cautious language like allegations being investigated, but for people in the industry, that was enough. Near the end of the workday, I was called to HR. Not because of me, but for the entire department. They announced that some projects would be temporarily frozen and that employees should cooperate by providing information if needed. I signed the confirmation form. My handwriting was very steady. Leaving the building, I saw Julian standing in the parking lot. He looked like someone who had been seriously ill. His shirt was wrinkled, his hair disheveled, and his eyes darted around constantly. "Let's talk," he said. "Not here. Afraid? I don't want you to cause a scene." He sneered, but only for a moment. "I've lost everything. You still have the right to cooperate." "Easy for you to say," he approached me. "Do you know what I used to think? I'm not interested. I thought you would drown yourself after the divorce." I looked at him for a long time. "You were wrong. You never loved me." "I did," I said. "But love doesn't mean eternal patience." He stepped back and leaned against his car. "I don't understand." "You don't need to understand," I replied. "You just need to take responsibility." A man from his legal team approached and said something to him. Julian nodded, then looked at me again. "It won't be easy for you either." "It won't be for you either," I said. He got into his car and slammed the door hard. That night, I didn't go back to the SRO. I went to Chloe's apartment. She opened the door and hugged me tightly. "Ev, are you okay?" "I'm okay." "He's been summoned for further questioning." "I know." We sat on the floor and ate instant noodles. Outside the balcony, the city lights were bright. Chloe looked at me for a long time. "Do you regret it?" I thought for a moment. "No." "Are you tired?" "Yes." "Then why do you keep going?" I took a sip of water. "Because if I don't do it now, I'll be tired for the rest of my life." That night, I slept very deeply. The next morning, the news broke officially. No more ambiguity. Julian's name was mentioned along with several projects and figures of corruption. The comments flooded in. Some were sympathetic, some triumphant. I didn't read them. A text came from Marcus. "Phase 1 complete," I replied, switching to Phase 2. In the afternoon, I met with my lawyer. He showed me the documents and explained each step. Everything was proceeding within the legal framework, with no room for emotion. On the way back, I paused in front of an elevator mirror. The woman in the reflection looked very different from 8 years ago. Not sharper, but clearer. In the evening, I called my mother. "Mom, have you had dinner?" "Yes, don't worry. No one's bothering you?" "No. You're doing the right thing." I was silent for a few seconds. "I'm sorry for worrying you. Seeing you live well is what makes me happiest." I hung up and sat by the window. The wind blew gently, the city was still noisy, and life went on. I opened my notebook and wrote the last line for that day. "The enemy has begun to crumble from within." I underlined it. This wasn't the end. It was just the moment everything was revealed. And when the light shines, no secret can last long. The night after the news broke, the city didn't change. Only the invisible currents beneath it moved more violently. I woke up early, washed my face with cold water, and looked in the mirror. The initial elation from the day everything exploded had vanished, leaving only a sharp, cold composure. It was easy to make mistakes at this stage, as people often assume a fallen person won't get back up. I knew Julian hadn't surrendered yet. He was never the type to quietly accept defeat. I went to the lawyer's office as scheduled. The former judge Marcus had introduced me to Mr. David Chen, was a man of few words, but each one was concise and carried weight. He handed me a thick file. "We'll proceed one step at a time," he said. "You won't need to be heavily involved. Let the documents do the talking." "What about the assets?" I asked. "He's trying to overturn it, but the record of the asset freeze and the pressure he applied post-divorce will work in your favor." I nodded. I didn't need a quick win. I needed a definitive one. Leaving the lawyer's office, a text came from Chloe. "He's been summoned for a second round of questioning. They found evidence of abnormal cash withdrawals. Keep a record of everything. There's something else." Chloe hesitated. He called me. "You?" "He asked about you. What you still have." I smiled. "What did you say?" I told him I didn't know. "Good job." I ate lunch alone. I skimmed a few newspaper articles. Before long, Julian's name appeared more frequently, followed by speculative and analytical pieces. I wasn't interested in outside opinions. I focused only on the documents and the timeline. As the afternoon began, A call came from an unknown number. Ms. Reed? Yes. My name is Sarah Evans. I'm an old friend of Julian's. I was silent for a second. What can I do for you? I just wanted to talk. About what? About Julian. He's not in a good state right now. I looked out the window. That's no longer my concern. I know, Sarah sighed. But you were married to him. What do you want? There was a brief silence. He said if you drop the suit, he's willing to compensate you. I let out a very small laugh. Please tell him, I said slowly, that I will neither drop the suit nor accept any compensation. Evelyn, you don't know what he's capable of. I am prepared. I hung up. I knew calls like this would continue. People would use old affections, pity, and social pressure. I had come too far to turn back for such things. Late in the evening, I returned to the SRO. I hadn't moved out yet. I needed more time to wrap everything up quietly. There was a thin envelope on the floor in front of my door. I picked it up and opened it. Inside was a handwritten note in Julian's script. Let's talk one last time. I crumpled the note and threw it in the trash. Last was a concept for people who held out hope. I did not. That night, my father called. Someone came by asking about you. Who? Said he was a friend of your ex-husband. What did you say, Dad? That you weren't here. I closed my eyes. That was the right thing to do. Be careful. I know. After the call, I phoned Marcus. The target has begun using third parties. We anticipated that, he replied. We have protective measures in place. Thank you. Remember, he added, do not engage in personal contact. I won't. The next morning, I went to work early. As soon as I sat down, HR called me in. The investigation team has some additional questions. I nodded and followed them into a room. 2 men were seated. Their voices were calm. Miss Reed, you are Julian Croft's ex-wife, correct? Yes. Do you know anything about his personal cash flow? I was not involved. When did your marriage end? Recently. They took notes and asked a few more questions. I answered truthfully, without adding or omitting anything. The truth, when told at the right time, was a very powerful weapon. Leaving the room, I let out a long breath. Not out of fear, but because I knew everything was now moving to a different level. There were no more rumors or vague threats, only documents and the law. In the afternoon, Chloe called. Her voice was low. He's been taken into custody for the investigation. I was silent. Ev, are you there? Yes. Are you okay? I'm okay. I got up and went out to the office's small balcony. The sky was cloudy, but it wasn't raining. In the evening, I returned to the SRO and packed my things. I no longer needed to be here. I had played my part. I looked around the room, touching the peeling wall with my hand. This place had watched me rise from nothing. I closed the door and left with my suitcase. I moved temporarily into Chloe's small apartment. She gave me a cup of tea. Ev, is it almost over? No, I replied. We're only in the middle. What's left? The confrontation. That night, I received a call from Mr. Chen. The other side has proposed a settlement for tomorrow. They're asking for a reduction in terms. My position is not to settle, I said. Please proceed according to procedure. The lawyer was silent for a moment. Understood. I hung up and sat by the window. The city lights were visible in the distance. I was neither happy nor sad. I just felt that I was on the right path. I opened my notebook and wrote another line. The enemy seeks an exit, but it is not granted. I underlined it. Tomorrow, I would face the past directly. Not to hold on, but to close it. The morning of the day I had to face him came earlier than expected. I woke while the city was still dim. Sitting by the window in Chloe's apartment, I watched the high-rise buildings shrouded in a light fog. Previously, the mere thought of seeing Julian again would have made my chest tighten, but not this morning. Inside me, there was only a very quiet space, like the surface of a lake after all the sediment has settled. Mr. Chen called at 7. We'll meet at the office at 9. The other party has confirmed their attendance. Understood. Remember, he added, do not answer anything beyond what I permit. I will. I hung up and got dressed. The dress I chose was a modest, mid-tone color that gave a neat and polite impression. I didn't want to stand out, nor did I want to look weak. I just needed to appear as I was, a person who had moved on from a marriage and was protecting her legal rights. On the way to the lawyer's office, a text came from an unknown number. "Evelyn, it's me." I didn't reply. When the car stopped in front of the building, I took a deep breath. I had imagined this moment countless times, but reality was different. There was no thunder, no racing heart, just the single step of my foot onto the cold stone pavement. The mediation room was on the 5th floor. When I entered, Julian was already there. He was noticeably thinner, and his gaze was not as sharp as before, but he was still trying to maintain a semblance of his old confidence. Next to him sat a young lawyer with a nervous expression. Julian looked at me for a long time. "You came." I nodded without replying and sat down next to my lawyer. Mr. Chen placed a stack of documents on the table and spread them out with complete nonchalance. The mediation began with familiar, dry, legal terminology. I listened and answered when questioned. Julian did not. He kept interrupting, trying to inject emotion into the conversation. "She knew the company's situation very well," he said. "She's not innocent in this." Mr. Chen looked him straight in the eye. "Please present your evidence," Julian faltered. I'm telling the truth. The truth requires evidence," the lawyer replied. I looked at Julian. In that moment, I felt his powerlessness clearly, not because he was about to lose, but because for the first time, he couldn't overwhelm someone with his voice alone. It was my turn. "Miss Reed," the mediator said, "what is it you hope to achieve in this mediation?" "I want everything to be handled according to the law," I replied. "No more, no less. If the other party shows sincerity, would you be willing to withdraw some of your demands?" I shook my head. "No." The room fell silent. Julian turned to me. "Do you really want to corner me like this?" I looked at him very calmly. "You walked there yourself." The opposing lawyer whispered something to him. Julian closed his eyes for a second, then opened them. "If I accept the settlement, can you put in a good word for me?" I tilted my head slightly. "Are you asking me for a favor?" He forced a smile. "You were my wife." I was silent. In that moment, 7 years of memories flashed by quickly. The parties where I stood behind him, the moments I received my living allowance, the nights I listened quietly as he lectured me on life. I let it all go and said, "It is precisely because I was your wife that I cannot do otherwise." The mediation ended an hour later without an agreement. As everyone stood up, Julian blocked me at the door. "Evelyn," he said in a low voice, "I know I was wrong, but you didn't have to go this far." "You're mistaken," I replied. "I didn't go this far. I simply stopped at the right time. You didn't give me a chance. I gave you 8 years of chances." He was silent. I walked past him without looking back. Leaving the building, I felt a lightness. Not because I had won, but because the final string had been cut. In the afternoon, I met with Marcus as planned. He listened to my account and nodded. "The failure of mediation is a good thing," he said. "The legal process will move faster now. I just want everything to end cleanly." "It will," he replied. "But what will you do after?" I thought for a moment. "I want to work." "Where?" "Somewhere I can use what I know without having to hide it." Marcus smiled. "I have a proposal." He handed me a job description. It wasn't flashy, no vague promises, just the title of Risk Analysis Consultant. "Consider it," he said. I took the document. My mind was very calm. That night, I returned to the apartment and opened the window to let the breeze in. Chloe looked at me. "How did it go?" "One chapter is closed." "Are you sad?" I shook my head. A little regretful. Not for him, but for the years I spent in silence. Chloe just poured more tea. At night, I opened my notebook and slowly wrote, "Confrontation complete. No more emotional ties." I underlined it and closed the notebook. Outside, the city was still bright, and life went on, and I had crossed to the other side of the river. After the mediation, the next few days flowed with a completely different rhythm. No more barrages of calls, no more texts that were half threat and half plea. This silence wasn't a frightening void, but the quiet hum of a machine that had switched to autopilot. The documents had left my hands and were now moving on a straight, cold, legal track. I just needed to watch, not rush. I started my new job based on Marcus's offer. There was no welcome party, no loud celebration, just a small desk, a large monitor, and a pile of reports. I liked the simplicity. It allowed me to focus on what I did best, reading numbers and hearing the hidden voices behind them. On the first morning, I arrived early. The office was still empty. I turned on my computer and skimmed through the risk analysis documents for a project under review. I read very slowly, underlining discrepancies and making notes in the margins. No one knew how I used to work in the kitchen under a yellow light while Julian slept. As long as I knew, that was enough. In the middle of the day, Marcus stopped by. "Are you getting used to the work? It's very familiar." He didn't ask further, just nodded. I liked his way of respecting boundaries. No one here needed my life story. They wanted results. At lunchtime, a call came from Mr. Chen. "There's an update," he said. "The opposing party has filed a motion to amend some clauses in the documents. It's not significant, but it seems like an attempt to buy time. The chances are not high. I trust you, Mr. Chen. Please let me know of any progress." After the call, I returned to my monitor. Work helped me keep my mind from wandering. It kept me standing straight. In the afternoon, Chloe sent a text. "He's under a lot of pressure. Some acquaintances asked about you." "What did you say?" "That you're working and not involved." "Good job." I knew that at this stage, public opinion would start to divide. There would be people on my side, people who pitied Julian, and people who were just curious. I didn't need to participate. My silence now was the best shield. In the evening, I returned to the apartment and prepared a simple meal. I ate slowly, listening to the sound of water boiling, the knife on the cutting board, very mundane sounds. I realized I hadn't cooked for myself with such a peaceful mind in a long time. In the past, meals were always linked to responsibility, to the gaze of evaluation. Not anymore. After dinner, I called my mother. I started my job. "Is the work okay?" "It's fine. Take care of yourself." "I will." I hung up and stood by the window. Cars passed by on the street below. I no longer felt like I had to hide. I could stand anywhere with my own name and my own job. Over the next few days, my life's rhythm gradually stabilized. I went to work in the morning, came home in the afternoon, and read or wrote notes in the evening. I no longer checked the news frequently. If there was anything important, my lawyer or Marcus would let me know. One afternoon, Marcus called me into his office. "There's something," he said. "I'd like you to participate in the official review team for the next project." "What do I need to prepare?" "Just do what you've been doing." I nodded. I didn't ask why he trusted me. This trust stemmed not from my divorce story, but from the analysis report I had submitted. That night, I received a text from a familiar number. It was Julian. "I'm going to trial soon." I stared at the text without emotion. "Just thought you should know." I put the phone down. I didn't reply. A belated notification no longer had any effect. The next morning, I was invited to an internal meeting. It was a complex project, with many risk factors. I presented concisely, pointing out the areas that needed attention. The room was quiet. Marcus nodded. "This opinion will be included in the final report," he said. The meeting ended. A young colleague smiled at me. "You explain things very clearly." "Thank you." That was the first moment I was publicly acknowledged for my ability, not for a role related to someone else. In the afternoon, Mr. Chen called. "The trial date has been set." "When is it?" "Next week." "Do I have to attend?" "Yes, but it will be very brief." "Understood." I hung up and continued working. I didn't let emotion interfere. I had learned that. The night before the trial, I didn't lose sleep. I organized my documents and prepared my clothes. I didn't hope for anything. I just wanted everything to proceed correctly. The next morning, I arrived at the courthouse with my lawyer. The hallway was long, the lighting white. Julian was sitting on a bench opposite us. He looked at me. His eyes seemed tired. I gave a very polite nod of acknowledgement. The trial proceeded faster than I expected. The documents were clear, the evidence sufficient. When the judge read the verdict, I heard every single word distinctly. Not because it decided someone's fate, but because it confirmed that what I had been through was not my imagination. Leaving the courtroom, Julian called out to me. Evelyn. I stopped. I'm sorry. I looked at him. The apology was late, but not meaningless. It just no longer had any effect. I accept it, I said. But I'm not going back. He didn't say more, just nodded. I walked outside. The weather was clear. I took a deep breath. There was no applause, no dramatic moment, just a conclusion that had found its rightful place. In the afternoon, I returned to the office and continued to work. Marcus saw me and said briefly, "Congratulations. Thank you." In the evening, I returned home and opened my notebook. I wrote the last line for this phase. Legal proceedings concluded. The beginning of a new life. I underlined it and closed the notebook. Outside, the city lights came on. I was no longer standing on the edge. I had walked in on my own 2 feet. After the trial, I didn't take a break right away. I knew one thing very well. When the door of the law closes, the door of real life opens. And that's when a person is most likely to lose their rhythm. I returned to the office as usual, relieved, but not relaxed. The numbers on the screen were still cold and objective. They didn't care what I had been through. I liked that. Marcus gave me a new, more difficult and complex file. It was a project that looked very good on the surface. The projected returns were high, the partners reputable, and the press praised it. I read it line by line and soon found small cracks. Cracks that, if not addressed, would become ruptures. I made notes and sent back my opinion. Marcus replied briefly, "You've hit the core of the issue." I had lunch with my colleagues. For the first time, I participated in a common conversation without feeling like an outsider. They asked me about my approach to seeing risk. I answered moderately. No one asked about my past marriage. Perhaps they knew, but chose not to delve deep. That respect made me feel like I belonged. In the afternoon, I went to the bank with my lawyer to finalize the last paperwork related to my parents' property. When the bank clerk stamped the final document, I let out a long sigh. A heavy burden that had been weighing me down was finally lifted. I called my father. "It's all over." On the other end of the line, my father's voice softened. "Good. Now live for yourself." I hung up and stood in front of the bank's glass door, watching people come and go. So many lives brushing past each other, yet no one knew the wars they were fighting. In the evening, I returned to my newly leased apartment. It wasn't large, but it was bright and quiet. I cleaned it myself, organizing every little corner. Putting everything in its place felt like rearranging myself. I hung a small, simple painting. I didn't need much. That night, I had a strange dream. I was standing in the old kitchen of my former house, but no one was there. No voices, no gazes. I woke up and realized I no longer feared my memories. They were now a part of me, not a shackle. Over the next few days, I became busier. The work pushed me in a positive way. I started leading small analyses and was asked for my opinion in meetings. I didn't talk much, but when I did, I was precise. Marcus noticed. One afternoon, he called me into his office. "Have you thought about going further?" Further? Taking a more proactive role, leading a team. I was silent for a few seconds. "I need time." "Don't rush," he said. "I just wanted to let you know that we see you." I left the office. My heart was very calm. Recognition had come at the right time. Not too early, not too late. Chloe visited me over the weekend. We cooked and chatted. She looked at me and smiled. "Ev, you've changed." "How so?" "You're lighter. You're not trying so hard anymore. Aren't you afraid it will all fall apart again someday?" "Anything can fall apart," I said. "But this time, I know I can get back up." In the evening, I went for a walk alone. The city lights were on, the wind cool. I saw bustling restaurants, small families, young couples. I didn't compare. I just observed. Everyone had their own rhythm of life, and I was finding mine. A text came from an unknown number. I opened it. "Evelyn, I'll be abroad for a while. It's Julian. Just wanted to say goodbye." I looked at the screen and thought for a long time. Then, for the first time in months, I replied, "I wish you peace." That was all. No more, no less. I put the phone down. I felt another door close. The next morning, I went to work early. I opened a report and started a new day. There was nothing pulling me back. The future was not yet clear, but it was no longer daunting. That evening, Marcus sent me an email. Prepare the proposal for the next quarter. I'd like to list you as a co-author. I read the sentence over and over. Not an assistant, not a behind-the-scenes figure, but a co-author. I smiled. In the evening, I opened my notebook and wrote another line. I am no longer living to survive, but beginning to live, to build. I underlined it and closed the notebook. The night outside was very quiet. I sat by the window, sipping tea, letting the silence seep into every breath. I didn't know what the future held, but I knew I would walk forward on the very same feet that had once trembled but never collapsed. I started the new quarter with a very different mindset. I was no longer someone standing on the edge, nor someone who had to prove their existence. I was a member of the team, and more importantly, a person with responsibility. Marcus assigned me to lead the risk analysis for a large-scale infrastructure project in the Midwest. The sheer scale of this project was enough to make anyone nervous. The capital was vast, the timeline long, and multiple stakeholders were involved. I knew this was not only a professional challenge but also a test of guts. My team consisted of 4 people. The youngest was 26, the oldest 33. In our first meeting, they looked at me with a mix of curiosity and appraisal. I didn't give a long introduction. I said only one thing. We work with data and responsibility, not emotions. The atmosphere in the room changed instantly. I delegated tasks, listened to opinions, and asked questions. I didn't force. I guided them to see the problem in layers. When the meeting ended, I knew I had chosen the right approach. Over the next few days, I worked more than usual, not because I had to, but because I wanted to. I read reports late into the night, checking every assumption and every number. Sometimes I was tired, but it was the satisfying fatigue of someone who is building, not just surviving. One afternoon, Marcus stopped by while I was revising an analysis report. Are you comfortable in your new role? I still have much to learn. A good answer. He glanced at the draft on my screen. What do you see as the biggest risk? It's not financial, I replied. It's managerial. If we can't control the entangled interests, everything will slip. Marcus nodded. Correct. Continue in this direction. I knew that trust was being built, little by little, not with words, but with work. Meanwhile, my personal life also gradually stabilized. I grew accustomed to my small apartment and quiet evenings. I no longer checked my phone every time a strange text arrived. I no longer startled at the sight of a familiar back on the street. My body learned how to relax again. One weekend evening, I went to my parents' house. A simple dinner, fish stew, steamed vegetables. My father asked about work, and my mother asked about my meals. No one mentioned Julian. That silence was a gift. After dinner, I sat on the porch, listening to the sound of crickets. My father poured me tea and said slowly, "You're doing well." I looked at my father. I just did what had to be done. Not everyone has the courage. I didn't answer. To have courage or not was sometimes just a choice between being hurt once or being hurt for a very long time. Back in the city, I received an invitation to attend a professional seminar. Marcus suggested I present a small segment. I hesitated, then agreed. Talking about risk and management in front of people was what I used to do quietly. Now, I would do it publicly. On the day of the seminar, I wore a simple outfit and took the stage with a steady heartbeat. I didn't talk much. I spoke clearly. I gave examples, analyzed, and concluded. When the presentation ended, the room was silent for a few seconds before applause broke out. It wasn't loud, but it was enough. Afterward, a middle-aged man approached and offered a handshake. Your presentation was very practical. Thank you. I'd like to collaborate if the opportunity arises. I nodded. New doors were opening, not in a rush, but surely. That night, I returned home very late. I sat by the window and opened my notebook. I no longer wrote about Julian. Now, the entries were about work, direction, and things I wanted to learn. I realized that when a person doesn't look back, they naturally move forward faster. A week later, I received a call from Mr. Chen. The case is completely closed. Thank you. Would you like to hear news of the other party? No, that's all right. The lawyer was silent for a moment. You are one of the few people I've seen who can walk away from a case without holding a grudge. I smiled, because a grudge is too heavy to carry. After the call, I felt that a circle had closed, not because I had won, but because I was no longer being dragged along. At the office, my team completed the first report. I submitted it to the management. Marcus replied the same day. Report is good. Proceed as proposed. I read the email. My heart was very calm. In the evening, Chloe called. Ev, you're so busy these days. Yes, but you seem happier. Yes. Ev, are you thinking about anything else? Besides work? I thought for a moment. Not yet. I'm learning how to live fully on my own right now. Chloe laughed. That's more than enough. I put down the phone, turned off the lights, and lay in bed. I didn't need to fill the void with someone else. I was filling it with myself. Before falling asleep, I opened my notebook again and wrote a short line. Beginning to stand at the center of my own life. I underlined it and closed the notebook. Outside, the city was sinking into the night. I closed my eyes and fell into a deep, dreamless sleep. I realized I had come a very long way one morning when I woke up without reflexively checking my phone. Sunlight streamed into the small apartment, and the wind gently swayed the curtains. I made tea, listening to the sound of the water boiling. Everything flowed in a slow, precise rhythm. There was no bad news to wait for, no fear lurking behind every sound. That feeling was more precious to me than any victory. The work was entering its final stages. The Midwest project needed a final decision. My team and I continued to review the details. The meetings grew longer, and the data sheets piled up. I was no longer standing behind someone's back. I stood in front of the whiteboard, pointing out risk factors. When opposing opinions arose, I listened and countered with data. I didn't need to raise my voice. I let the numbers speak for me. One late afternoon, Marcus asked me to stay after work. The conference room was empty, the lighting soft. He looked at me for a long time. Are you ready for the next step? What step? Taking on greater responsibility. Officially leading a project. I was silent. Not because I hesitated, but because I knew this answer would change many things. I'm ready, I said. Marcus nodded. Then starting next week, you're the team lead. I stood up and bowed my head slightly. Thank you. No need to thank me. You earned this yourself. Leaving the conference room, I walked very slowly. An image of myself 8 years ago flashed in my mind. The woman standing in the kitchen, receiving money for groceries, hiding loose change in her pocket. I no longer blamed that past. Without those years, there would be no me today. Over the weekend, I went to visit my parents in the countryside. This time, I didn't bring any worries. I brought peace. My father was fixing a fence, and my mother had planted a few more flower pots. I helped my mother water them, listening to stories about the neighbors. Small stories, unrelated to money or fame. I suddenly realized that happiness is sometimes enough just to be fully present where you belong. In the evening, my father asked, "Are you thinking of buying a house?" "I'm considering it." "Don't rush, as long as you have a place to come back to." I nodded. I knew that this time, my decision would not be based on fear. Back in the city, I received an unexpected invitation. It was for a small panel discussion on women and finance. It wasn't glamorous. At first, I declined. I didn't want to turn my story into a slogan, but something Marcus said made me think. It's not about talking about yourself, but about talking about how to stand up. I agreed. On the day of the panel, the room wasn't large. I looked at the faces in front of me. There was a wide range of ages. I didn't go into detail. I talked about discipline, self-learning, and not entrusting your entire life to someone else's hands. I spoke very slowly, every word coming from my own lived experience. When the talk ended, no one clapped loudly, but a few people stayed behind and approached me. "I'm in the same situation you were in," a young woman said in a trembling voice. "Don't rush," I replied. "Prepare first." I didn't offer promises or cliché advice. I just gave them the one thing I had lacked back then, the truth. That night, I returned home and opened my notebook. I wrote about the panel and those gazes. I realized that when I stood firm, I could, even if just for a moment, be a place for someone else to lean on. A week later, I received an email from Julian. It was not a plea or an accusation, just a very short sentence. "I've left. Thank you for not destroying me." I read it and closed it. I didn't reply, not out of resentment, but because everything that needed to be said had already been said. My final act of kindness was not to hold on to a past that might return. The project was approved. My team proceeded as planned. The work pushed me, but it didn't make me lose myself. I learned to rest at the right times, eat regularly, and maintain healthy relationships. I no longer needed to prove anything. One evening, Chloe came over with a small bottle of wine. "Congratulations, team lead," she smiled. "Thanks. Do you feel empty at all?" I shook my head. "I feel full." "Of what?" "Of the things I never had before." We talked late into the night. No one mentioned the old names. We talked about upcoming trips and small plans. Before sleeping, I stood by the window and looked at the city. The lights reflected in the glass. I saw myself in it, clear, undistorted me. I was no longer running or chasing. I was living in the present tense, and it was difficult enough and beautiful enough. I opened my notebook and wrote the last line for this part. No longer a person passing through a storm, but a person who knows how to build a roof. I underlined it and closed the notebook. Tomorrow, I would start a new job, not to prove, but to continue. I greeted the final morning of this journey with a very different mindset. There was no longer a feeling of waiting for something to happen, nor the anxiety of having to defend myself. I woke up and opened the windows, letting sunlight stream into the familiar room. The city outside was still noisy and bustling, but I was no longer swept away. I stood still at the center of my life, observing everything with a serenity I had never had before. The workday began like any other. I arrived at the office, greeted people, and sat down. My team had grown accustomed to a collaborative rhythm, and they knew what to do without many words. I looked at the young faces and felt that they trusted not me personally, but the way we worked together. That was more precious to me than any title. At lunchtime, Marcus asked me to eat with him. We didn't talk about projects or the past. We talked about very mundane things, reading habits, how to maintain energy during long work hours. Before standing up, he said one brief thing. "You've been through enough. The rest is just about living well." I smiled. I knew it wasn't a compliment, but a reminder. In the afternoon, I completed the final quarterly report. When I submitted it, there was no longer a sense of nervousness. I knew I had done my best. Whatever the outcome, I would accept it. This was a very heavy, but very clear, growth. After quitting time, I didn't go straight back. I walked for a long time on the crowded streets. I saw rushing faces, young couples arguing in low voices, merchants calling out to customers. I suddenly realized that everyone carries a story that no one knows. There are no completely happy people, nor completely unhappy people. The difference lies in whether they have the courage to face and take responsibility for their choices. That night, I returned home early, cooked for myself, and played quiet music. I ate slowly and didn't look at my phone. I let every moment flow fully. After washing the dishes, I sat at my desk and opened the notebook that had been with me throughout this long journey. The first pages were filled with dense text and a rushed script. Towards the back, the writing became sparser and more uniform. I turned to the last page and picked up my pen. I wrote, not fast, not slow. I wrote as if I were talking to myself. I have passed through a broken marriage, a time of being controlled, a time of standing on the edge. I was afraid. I was silent. I thought I had no choice. But it turns out, the choice was always there. It was just a matter of whether I had the courage to look at it straight on. I paused my pen, took a deep breath, and continued writing. I didn't defeat anyone. I just reclaimed my right to live for myself. I closed the notebook and put it in a drawer. I didn't need to write anymore. This story had reached its natural conclusion. Before falling asleep, I called my mother. "I'm doing well." "I know. I can tell just from your voice." I hung up, turned off the lights, and lay down. I didn't think. I didn't reminisce. I fell asleep very quickly, very deeply. The next morning, I woke up. There was no dramatic event, No tension, just the ordinary start of a day for a person who, after countless storms, had learned how to live an ordinary life. And for me, that was the greatest achievement of all.